Okay, welcome to the lecture on the scientific method. This particular activity is called Bubblegum and the Scientific Method, and it is something that we're going to be going through to teach you about the scientific method. It's fun, it's pretty simple, it's something you can do at home, really. Um, what we are going to start with here is just a couple questions. What is it that bubblegum can teach us? Can it teach us anything? Well, we can ask ourselves those kind of questions, and it may not be able to teach us anything without our willingness to learn from it, right? So we have to be able to be willing to learn from it. So what you're going to do is you're first going to start thinking of some things that you might be able to learn from bubblegum, and you're going to take a moment and fill in some of those things there, and you can pause the video and then come back to see what we say. All right, so now that you have come back, you can probably guess some of the things we might have here. You might have thought, well, bubblegum might be able to teach me something about my mouth. Maybe you are going to learn something about your mouth because of bubblegum. Maybe you're going to learn about chewing your jaw. Maybe your jaw is going to be sore. Maybe it's not. Maybe you've learned something about your saliva. Maybe something about your saliva um, is interesting. Why does your saliva start to, come out of your mouth when you start to chew on bubblegum? Maybe it teaches you something about, the stickiness of bubblegum. Why is it sticky? Why does it stick together and also then stick to other things? There's many things you can learn from bubblegum. Those are just a few of them. But, we ask ourselves, did the bubblegum actually teach us anything? Or was it, um, okay, or was it that your brain was able to put together some of those pieces and help you to learn those lessons? Okay, what went through your head in order for you to learn those lessons? That's a good question, right? All right, so I want you to think about these words here, and I want you to try to describe any of those words that might have helped you to learn those lessons. You can pause now to fill that out on your worksheet. Okay, well, now that you are back, you may have circled many of these different ideas. In fact, in the past, I've probably had almost all of these circled by various students. One that some of students don't typically circle as sorting, and organize is not as circled as often. But basically, every single one of these are basically higher level types of thinking that will allow you to discover some of the truths about the universe through science. Okay, so when we're learning about things, we are learning about things through the scientific method. Okay, so the scientific method is a way of thinking. Okay, now it might seem like, oh, well, it's easy to figure out the scientific method, but it's actually been a lot of years that went into figuring out what the scientific method was. In ancient Greek days, it's believed that many of the philosophers would think about a question, but wouldn't really test that question. And so for us to get to the point where we think about the question and then test it actually has been a pretty significant advance in our civilization. So how do we get ready? Well, we need to be ready to write down our data. Okay, so that's one of the things that we need to be ready to do as we prepare to do an experiment. But how do we figure out what data is it that we're going to collect? Well, we have, as part of our organizing process, as we make a data table, okay, we are going to try to think about how many columns, how many rows, what kind of data are we actually collecting. One of the ways that I like to suggest to collect data is to go through the procedures and try to figure out what kind of information is most necessary. So if you look over here, we want to try and highlight all the different things that we want to collect in our data table, and that will help us to make our data table. Okay, so if you see here, it says to find the mass of a weighing boat. Well, that's a piece of data, so that would be something we'd want to probably have on our data table. Okay, and then it says that, you know, we could do a method where we're subtracting the value, and so this might give us a difference, and so this could be a point on our data table. Here we've got another one where it says mass. Okay, oops, sorry, find the mass of the unwrapped piece of chewing gum. It says to record, of course that's going to be part of that same part right there. It says to weigh it right here, okay, after 15 seconds. So that's a little piece of data you might want to know. And then it says to chew again for another 15 seconds and then weigh it again. And so we've got some pieces of data that should be on a data table. In fact, it also tells us here that we should make sure to have a row for the heading, right? So we need to make sure that we have some labels there. And we want a column for the class average. We want to be able to record a class average if we were going to do that. So these are all the different components that we'd probably want to put on a table. So how many rows would that have? How many of those, you know, columns and rows? Well, the answer here could, you know, can vary. Okay, so yeah, we talked about the idea that you could have various numbers of columns and rows, um, but let's take a moment, and I'm going to have you try to figure out what you think that table might look like. Remember, it's one of the most important things for us to do before we do our experiment. We read through our procedures and we want to actually come up with a data table so that we have an organized way in which we can record the information that we get from our experiment. So, you know, just to kind of give you a little hint here, what we're trying to talk about, you know, perhaps we want to, you know, have a, let's try that again. I want to have, let's erase that, there we go. We want to have a table that can record some of the data that we've got here. And you can just create something about like that. Maybe you want to have a place to put your you know, column there. Maybe you want a few different rows. You know, maybe that's just kind of a start. Maybe you've got a, you know, a different look at yours. Again, there's not any perfect way to do it necessarily. There's a couple different ways that you could actually collect all that data that we'd highlighted before so that you get a fun looking table. So we'll let you pause now and then we'll pick up here in a second. Okay, so let's see what you came up with here. We're going to zoom in a little bit. And let's talk about you know, what we might want to have in this first column here. Probably in this case we've got time, right? Because you were recording every 15 seconds. One of the first things we did was record the mass. It's a little hard to read there, but that's time in seconds. We recorded the mass at different intervals, right? So we recorded it at 0 seconds. So let's say, all right, well, that's 0 seconds. Let's make our little line there. And then we recorded it at 15 seconds. Okay, and we could make another line there. We're recording it at 30 seconds. Oh, let's try that again. And so we had 30 seconds. And then as far as what these instructions, the procedures that you had so far didn't really go much more in detail than that. Let's have a column here for our mass. All right, so that was the time, and then we'd have mass. Again, apologize for how messy this is, mass in grams. And so this is where we'd record our mass in grams at these different intervals. And then it said to have a column for class average, right? So, you know, maybe we want to figure out what the class averages would be, and we'd fill those in at 0, 15, and 30 seconds. So we could say, all right, well, this is the class, and that's the average. and um, and then, there's a couple other ways that we could look at this. Maybe you were thinking, it says we're supposed to have the mass of the boat and the mass of the gum. So, you might have had some more columns over here where you were saying, well, I need the mass of the boat, I need the mass of the gum, I need the difference between the mass of the boat and gum and just the boat, so that way you could get the mass of the gum. Those would all be adequate, actually very good things to include as you are making a graph. Something like this, it might be the bare minimum for what we were talking about, but you notice something that's missing here is the mass of the boat. We have the mass of the gum at 0 seconds, but we don't actually have the mass of the boat included in this table. So we would need at least another column over here to try to talk about that. So again, this isn't the ultimate of a table example, but it does kind of give you an idea of how you could maybe collect some of the basics of what you're trying to collect. And so we'll pause there, and then we'll um, start over in the next